This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast is brought to you by TeamTrade, a digital solution that helps you hire, optimize, and retain employees. Using psychometric assessments to identify more than 100 professional mindset traits, it gives instant reports you can use to build high-performing teams. Get 2 free profiles today, no commitment, no credit card required, at teamtrait.com. TeamTrait.com. Welcome to the Manage Smarter podcast with hosts C. Lee Smith and Audrey Strong. We're glad you're here for discussions on new ways to manage smarter, hire, develop, and retain talent, improve results, and propel team performance to new heights. This is the Manage Smarter podcast.
Okay, this is almost like a hornet's nest today. I mean, it's so much, it's so huge, it's so like full of stinging and scenarios and juicy stuff and weird stuff and basic
queen
stuff.
bees.
Yeah, human resources, and we have an attorney here who's a labor attorney who's going to talk about all the latest stuff and how to manage it. Like, what is it called? Mouse jigglers? Is that right, Leah? Mouse
yeah.
jigglers.
Everything. Yeah. I'm gonna give you the buzz.
Okay.
Very
Spill
good.
the tea. So Leah, that's the topic today. It's gonna be great.
Well, and you know, one of my best friends is an employment lawyer, and so we talk about stuff all the time just because it's fun, and some of it's a little salacious, and maybe we'll get into a little bit of that. Just a little tease. I'm going on a different metaphor than you guys did, but anyway,
Okay.
but for later, in the show. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming to Manage Smarter, everyone. Today's episode will make your hair curl. No, just kidding. My name is Audrey Strong. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications here at Sales Fuel.
I wish I had more hair. I'm C. Lee Smith. I'm the CEO and founder of Sales Fuel.
What's left will curl. Okay, Leah Stiegler is our guest, and she can walk employers and you, our listening audience, through any workplace situation, from complex personnel matters that actually cannot be very funny. I don't want to, discount the importance and seriousness of labor law, but she can also help implement client-specific performance management practices. She advises employers to navigate these issues to keep them out of court. And her counseling covers the entire employment spectrum. That's recruitment, onboarding, workplace culture, pay equity, audits, RIFs, terminations, separation, how to do that lately, anything new with that, and severance packages. She is principal at Woods Rogers. That is a Virginia-based law firm serving clients nationally. So if you'd like to be a client, call her after we get done with the show. Leah, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was so excited. I couldn't even sleep last night. So I appreciate it. And I'm really excited.
That was probably a panic attack.
No, extremely excited to talk with you guys today. And you know what? You have to laugh about it, Audrey, because you have to laugh and smile and kind of about what we do, because we work with people, whether it's your managers working with the employees that they work with, or the managers themselves, right? It's people do wild things, and that's what makes life fun.
Can I ask you
can have an employment manual like 5 inches thick or whatever, and you're still going to have times where it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Oh, we never thought of that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, just before, Lee, you get into the ones you really want to know about, like a 15,000-foot question, which is 2025, when this episode comes out. I feel like the country and a lot of the workplaces and the sensibilities of the different workplace generations are like super hypersensitive right now. Like, pronoun police and you didn't say this, or it's much more like of a charged HR atmosphere. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, yes, 100%. I mean, I think a lot of that could be social media, and that people are just more sensitive to different things that come up. I was just talking to an HR client yesterday who said that they were working with 2 employees who were cooks in a kitchen at a university, and a student walked by and heard one of the cooks say to the other cooks, "Hey, let's have a little powwow. We need to talk about this thing," right? And one of the students reported, hey, that's offensive. And that's, offensive to the Native American community. And that's national origin discrimination and all this. And it turned into students kind of lining up in the cafeteria against these cooks. And I was like, wow, I think it was probably just an offhand, unintentional comment. But I do think whether it's what's happening in the news, in the world, and being talked about on social media, people are just more aware in today's world and potentially are, whether it's being hypersensitive or just more willing to be transparent and try to address a comment or a concern earlier on than maybe in the past when it was more acceptable to sort of let someone go on for a while until it really got to a point where you're saying, hey, this is offensive or whatnot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I wrote this book. This is my first book, Hire Smarter, Sell More. A big part of the book is I identified 13 different types of toxic personalities, which is different than toxic behavior. Everybody can have toxic behavior from time to time, but if you do it consistently, you're a toxic personality. So with that in mind, it's like, let's talk about toxicity in the workplace. What advice do you have for managers then to create a workplace then where people feel psychologically safe to be them best selves and to voice their opinions respectfully?
Oh, that's a really good one. I wish I had the answers to toxicity. That's also a term that I feel like is used a
Oh
lot
gosh,
in
yes.
today's world when you're talking
Yeah.
about sort of maybe what's different about 2025. I would say that the best advice I can give on that is for managers to address concerns early on, to hear someone out, regardless of whether they think the concern is ridiculous or whether they know that the person is wrong about their perception, whatever it may be, to make sure you sit down, you hear someone out, you give them the time of day. And then if it is something that could be concerning, then you do have to investigate or take that next step to look into it. And sometimes, and I think this is a little different today than maybe would have been in my advice 8 years ago or 10 years ago. It used to be that you could say to an employee who brought a complaint to you, hey, I'm sorry, I can't, it's a personnel matter. We can't tell you what happened with that. In today's world, I don't think you can do that. If you do that from an
Really?
HR or a management perspective, I think that just creates festering feelings, people having an impression that the company didn't do something right unless they see maybe the person they complained about being escorted out the building. And so
Mhm.
I think you have to be a little more transparent in today's world. So not only do you start from hearing the complaint, receiving, listening to them, receiving the complaint, but actually investigating it. But then the final step, I think you really have to go back and make sure that someone feels like the issue is resolved.
That's a relief to hear you say that because the complainant will always spin it, to their favor. I once had a narcissist in the company or whatever, and the thing about narcissists, I don't know who the first person was who said this, but it's brilliant. Said that a narcissist, when they tell a story, they're either the victim or the hero. They're never the villain, and so that's one of those things where they're going to think that the company either didn't do something or what they did was somehow wrong because the complainant is having their back channel conversations and spinning it to their benefit.
Oh, absolutely. I've just been dealing with this for a client this week where we brought in another law firm to come in and handle an investigation that involved allegations that with senior VPs, so pretty high up people in the company that were having issues with each other. And the complainant didn't necessarily get the results that they wanted, right? They wanted the other VP to be fired, walked out the door, like I said. The results of the investigation were largely unsubstantiated, and they moved forward with still imposing some remedial action, like, hey, let's get everybody here some executive coaching and some management training so that we can really make sure we're hearing each other better, communicating better. And so one of the issues was, though that gave the alleged victim, right, the complainant, to your point, Lee, that persona that, oh, something must have been wrong because they wouldn't impose this requirement that we undergo or that this other VP undergo coaching and whatnot. And so he started to spin the story. And now the company's involved in this damage control situation where the complainant is going on and communicating about maybe how their perception of what the company's processes were and arguing that it wasn't up to snuff. And the whole time he was right the whole time because they still imposed some remedial action. And so
Damned if
it's
you
it's
do, damned if you don't.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Let's go back to the two cooks. When an employee refuses to play nice in the sandbox. So So the powwow guy said the powwow in an offhand, completely innocent way, I'm sure,
Yeah, like, hey, let's
comes
just
back and
meet
says,
and
"What
talk
are you,
about
the speech police? Leave me alone. Don't sit there and try and dictate to
it.
me." And but then there's still an issue. So how do you mitigate that? And then those two still have to work together.
Yeah. Well, I would say you're going to end up your issues from if there's a manager over those two cooks, right? Let's just say the chef in the kitchen just to make it easier.
Okay.
So the chef is the
No
manager. Okay.
HR issues with the chef there.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. The chef is over there making his au jus or whatever. And so you're going to have two issues come about from a situation like that. One of them is your typical operational issues, which is how do we get these two people to get along and play nice in the sandbox and get back to work and actually complete the task that they're hired to do, right? How do we have kind of a facilitated conversation? Well, okay, I hear you. That was offensive. I'm sorry for my reaction. Let's shake hands and let's move on. I'll be more mindful. I wasn't aware that was an offensive term. And then you also have the legal issues that could come about from that, where you could have someone say, "Hey, that's a hostile environment based on national origin discrimination," right? Sort of mocking someone or using an offensive term or a term that's not politically correct. And so you've also got if there are more comments like that, or in some states, it only takes one offensive comment for someone to have a legally actionable claim. So then you also, as a manager, have to make sure that you are remediating that situation to a point where someone wouldn't have a legally actionable claim, which means you have to take prompt and effective action to make sure that conduct and comments like that do not continue, which would entail some sort of, education about the term, maybe a disciplinary or verbal coaching to make sure that someone understands it. So yeah, you've got those two issues you have to resolve.
Wow.
So
Okay.
you get somebody that's making a false allegation. And I think sometimes they don't think it through about, okay, that this could negatively impact my career here. But at the same point, the manager, though, can't go so far as to have any behavior that can be spun as retaliation. So it just seems to me like there's a potential there for things to blow up on two different ends and be something that's a negative experience for both people involved.
Oh yeah, I had a client yesterday tell me, so you're telling me that if anytime an employee wants to keep their job longer and make it harder for me to let them go, that they're just going to keep on reporting something, whether it's bogus or not. And I was like, not necessarily, but yeah, I could see your feelings on that, right?
Mhm.
Because you are right, Lee, that if someone reports something, whether even if it's false or if it's in bad faith, and the company soon thereafter takes some sort of adverse action like termination or demotion, there could be the perception that that was retaliatory, right? And that there's not a healthy culture where people can report complaints to managers. And so yeah, if someone does report something, even if it's false, whether they know that or not, yeah, you do have that additional concern that how do we address this without it appearing as retaliation?
And you can validate their feelings, but you don't have to validate their complaint.
Yes, always validate their feelings. I should put a sign on my wall about, we
Yeah.
have to remember to not only just the legal issues from a high technical standpoint, but you're right. I mean, we are dealing with humans and emotions. And oftentimes, I think egos tend to
Mm.
hold up processes. I mean, I would say more, especially high level individuals, ultimately get themselves pushed out of a place because of their egos or they're upset about something that they walk away and resign. And so egos really are going to dictate too how someone perceives a situation or perceives themselves as, the victim or the what'd you say? What'd you call it? Not the villain, the victim or the
Hero.
Hero.
hero. There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
Well, my ex-husband was a drug and alcohol tester and occupational therapy guy in a huge distribution warehouse for a big grocery store chain, right? And he said, if you think you're about to get fired, go march into HR and tell them I'm addicted to drugs or I'm addicted to alcohol because that stops the clock. And all of a sudden you're a protected class and
No.
blah, 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 blah. And so this whole idea of protected classes, um, one of the funny videos going into this is the question of I self-identify as a furry or I self-identify as a cat or a kumquat, whatever. It is. And I go in and I want an accommodation. What's the latest on all this crazy stuff? It's going on the leading edge of that. That's really all come under the woke umbrella. And that's probably all still for you as a litigator, litigation in progress. It hasn't all been settled law. It's like
Yeah,
happening
I don't,
now.
I don't, yeah, and I hate to admit, I haven't gone on and done any case law research to see if there have been any actual lawsuits involving someone who identifies as a furry, right?
Yeah.
But but no, as of right now, it's not a protected class to identify
Mhm.
as a cat or a dog, or and just for anyone who doesn't know what a furry is, it's someone who does feel like they identify as either a full animal or a part animal in some sense, like a wolf. Sometimes they wear ears or tails to work. And oftentimes clients will call and they're like, we have this employee who's sitting at our reception desk and they're sitting here with a tail and ears, you know? And I'm like, well, are they doing their job? Are people complaining? Maybe do customers laugh? Is it really a problem? Um, it's kind
Mhm.
of like pick your battles. Is it really something you want to fight? But I think going back to what your ex-husband said, I mean, every single person is in a protected class, right? I mean, every single person has a race, a gender, a sexual orientation, an age. I mean, everyone is in a protected class. So I think oftentimes people feel like, oh, well, if I'm a white male, then maybe I don't have any protections. And so let me create something, but that's not true. Even white men do have protections.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well,
So,
we promised to make this spicy, so let's do it. So let's talk about work devices. And let's say that you use your work phone or whatever, and you snap a picture of yourself that you wouldn't want to go public. You send it to your wife, or you're going to a website or whatever that you really shouldn't be going to at work, and there's residue on your laptop computer. What are some of the things other than don't do it that employees really need to be thinking about as far as not safe for work content on their computers and
Yeah,
phones?
hashtag NSFW, not safe for work. I learned that
Right.
last year and I love it. Well, I think the biggest thing is that stuff never actually disappears. In lawsuits, I mean, sometimes we'll subpoena social media entities. We will be able to get archived things. We'll take a phone and put it through a software system and get even
Hmm.
deleted
oh,
messages off
wow.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously there are certain workarounds, but I really think people need to understand that, um, that's not that one, those things are not going to disappear. And two, you better be so convicted that this person really wants to receive this message.
Hmm.
Let's say it's another employee. That's the main example where, I had a situation where a male employee sent a female employee a picture of his genitals. And she was getting terminated for being a no call, no show. And as she's walking out the door, she's yelling that she's been, experienced sexual harassment here and this is retaliation and whatnot. So even though they were walking her out the door for the no call, no show, right? That doesn't excuse it. We still had to investigate the sexual harassment. And turns out yes, he did send her a photo. She was able to send it to us. And um, no worries, we did not actually like compare the photo to him himself, so don't think we go that deep. But we asked him, we had the HR person ask him, did you do this? And he said, yeah. Well, I did, but yeah, she gave me her phone number, like, and she was
Ugh,
flirting with me. So his mindset was she
That was
clearly
consent.
wanted it. It was
wow.
consensual, right? It was
Wow.
not,
So what
but
is consent and what is not? That
yeah,
that's another topic right
and
there.
and and that's the concern there too, is like even if someone does consent on something like that at the time and maybe has an interest in another employee or whoever it is, that something negative happens to them at work and they're terminated or whatnot, they may turn around and use that against that person,
Hmm.
right? There's no that they're going to be able to easily say, no, that wasn't consensual. I had no option but to work with him, so I just said, okay, nice, thank you, And so people are it's gonna come down to who the jury thinks is more credible.
Just
Well,
kind of
he's
reminds me of that episode of Succession, right? With Logan Roy sending those pictures in to his female colleague sitting across the board
yes,
table.
yes, yes.
And he
Yeah,
accidentally
yeah.
sent one to his dad. I was like, yeah, that was fun. That was fun.
So is
Uh-oh.
there any, it's a consensual relationship in the workplace is almost like an oxymoron. It doesn't exist or should not exist. Just don't do it, or
You're
sign a
never gonna.
document like we're dating, but only outside of work, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely a realist in that any clients that still have a no workplace relationship or romance policy in their employee handbook are just behind the times. I mean, I just think if you read the statistics, um, people spend more than 40 hours a week at work, and they're gonna fall in love, just like they're
Yeah.
gonna fight and piss each other off. And so, hey, it might be that true love story. Like, why are you as an employer, why should you stand in the way of true love? You obviously, as I think it's easier for an employer, instead of just having a no tolerance policy on it, to make sure they navigate it appropriately, which is once they have some understanding that someone's in a relationship, to make sure, number one, they're not in a reporting structure together.
Mhm.
And two, you may not want them in the same department. And so it may be that based on your operational needs, you can't have them both working there if they want to continue in a relationship. But if it is easy to separate them or make sure they're not in a reporting structure or not in any sort of conflict of interest way setup where someone could have access to the other person's confidential or personnel information or whatnot. But another thing we do is have people sign love contracts, which is it's not
What's
necessarily a
that?
contract that it's
Yeah.
not a marriage contract, okay, but it's my lay term for it's basically a disclaimer. So
Okay.
think of a
Yeah.
manager who says, okay, I've got these two employees. They both work on the manufacturing floor. Really not shouldn't be, fraternizing during the day. But we are concerned that if things go poorly, maybe one of them gets written up for performance or is terminated, or even if things don't go poorly, that at some point one of them can turn around and say, "Hey, this was sexual harassment the whole time," right? We know that people do fall in love, but we also know they break up. Okay. And so an employer has to be mindful of that. And so it's essentially a disclaimer where they kind of sign off that yes, they're in some sort of relationship or situationship, whatever you want to call it, and that it is consensual and that they know and understand and read the harassment policy, which you're going to put in that disclaimer, and that they know that they can report to HR anytime that they feel uncomfortable that this is not no longer is a consensual relationship. And that really undermines someone's claim later to be able to say,
That's
this whole
interesting.
time I
Yeah.
was working there, I was experiencing sexual
Mhm.
harassment and the company did nothing. It's like, no, no, no. We sat down with you. You understood the policy and you said this was not harassment. This is a consensual relationship. And you even signed this document. So it really kind of inhibits their ability to proceed on a legal sexual harassment claim.
That leads me to one of my favorite topics that my friend and I talk a lot about, which is documentation. That uh, poorly managed, it can actually be a liability. Excessively, it can be a liability. But on the other hand, you have to have it, to protect yourself or whatever. What are some of the guidelines you can give to managers who are confused about the right way to do documentation?
Yeah, that's really good. I guess you're right. I don't think of it as much as you can go too far one way or the other. I would say documentation it saves you. I mean, if you're thinking about and how does an employment lawsuit actually play out in court? First, the plaintiff is going to put on their evidence and sit there and testify about how they were, let's just say, discriminated against and wrongfully terminated, and that they were this amazing performer. Okay. Well, the first thing you're going to do for using that documentation is you want to be able as to impeach the plaintiff and say, well, what about
Hmm.
this poor annual performance review? Or what about this write-up? And then even once the plaintiff has rest their case, then the defendant, the company gets to put on their defense. And their defense is going to be, let's say, no, it wasn't that Leah was it wasn't the fact that she's a woman. It was because she was a poor performer. And we're going to put every manager that ever worked with her on the stand
Hmm.
and every single one of their emails where they wrote to her and said, hey, again, you were 3 minutes late. You should be here before 8:30. Or, I asked you to submit this project by Friday's deadline and you didn't submit it to me until Sunday night, whatever it may be. And that documentation is what you would use in terms of exhibits. And so anytime I think really it would be really helpful for managers to think about if I'm sitting on a witness stand, how am I going to prove that this person is a poor performer? And if you don't have any documentation, it's just going to be your words versus the other person's words. And really, you're going to get yourself into a sticky situation where if you're not honest with your documentation, let's say a manager who doesn't like confrontation and gives everybody in their department exceeds expectations on their annual reviews, and you want to sit there and say this person was a poor performer, just know you're going to be impeached. And your lawyer is going to have to stand in the courtroom and say, hey, jury, don't believe our documentation. Believe what we're telling you today. And that's a really hard defense.
Well, it's just sort of like, though, any of that documentation, though, can be turned up in discovery, though. So it's like if you're trying to document a conversation you had either with HR or with a colleague or something like that, and they said this or something like that, or maybe you used colorful language that you really shouldn't be using to that person,
Sure.
whatever. I mean, you basically, before you put anything in writing, like a text message or an email, or whatever, you're going to have to think about, how does this look if I had to be on the stand explaining this?
Oh, that's a really good point. Managers should really make sure they focus on the facts, right? So like to your point, I've had a case where the manager or did a write-up and just made a conclusion. They said, I'll just come up with names. Leah harassed Sarah.
Did you?
And yeah, and they just kind of concluded it, right? That was their conclusion. But that's because they were reporting that that Sarah had come to them and said, "Hey, Leah's harassing me." And so their conclusion in this write-up was just Leah harassed Sarah. And then the person later is filing a harassment lawsuit, and we're trying to defend there was no harassment. And the manager was fumbling through his deposition being like, "Yeah, no, it wasn't harassment. I don't know. Well, she said she was harassing her, and so I wrote that and wrote her up for it." But there's a difference between the conduct that happens in the workplace and the actual legal standard for harassment. And so I'd be always encourage managers, just focus on the actual facts. Okay, don't characterize anything as anything. Just say, okay, Leah approached Sarah at her desk, started yelling at her about where the report was, pounded her fist on the table. That's not unlawful harassment, right? That's just inappropriate behavior. And so really by making sure the documentation focuses on the facts, so you're not creating a record that's going to be used against you.
Your website is woodsrogers.com. It's ROGERS, everybody. We're running a little long on time, Lee. Can I take the last question? Because I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the mouse jigglers,
Yes,
which is
ahead.
the tackling work from home fraud. That was the promise at the top of the show. I would argue that we can tell when somebody's doing work from home fraud because they don't have a work product. They produce nothing. You can tell when things aren't getting done. So, I mean, what is the latest thing that people are doing and how do they get around that?
Oh, well, it's $19.99 on Amazon, Audrey. It's a mouse jiggler. So you go to Amazon and you can purchase these little devices. One is that you put your mouse on it and it kind of keeps the mouse moving and jiggling so your computer stays awake, or that the computer is sensing that there is activity.
Right.
Or they have these little keyboard pressers that will just randomly press keyboard buttons throughout the day. So you could walk away. Many employers think, oh my gosh, if my employees are working from home, they're going to be working two jobs. How will I know? And they want to buy all this monitoring software to see if they're really sitting at their desk.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I really hate all that stuff. I really think that employers need to manage performance. And I'd say really focus on, are they actually meeting the expectations of the job? And one of your workplace benefits may be that employees can work from home. And so if I can work from home and get everything I need to do done in 6 hours, then guess what? Give me those extra 2 hours off to go do whatever I need to do. Don't be monitoring my performance. You may be kicking an employee out the door who's a great performer just because you want them sitting in their chair at a desk at home waiting for more work to come through. And so I really say focus on performance and you manage someone that way. Don't focus on how they work, right? And employers get themselves into hot water when they try to deduct time from their pay when they see that the software says they took 3 20-minute breaks or whatnot. You're going to get yourself into wage and hour trouble. And so really focus on performance. Don't focus on trying to navigate what kind of devices employees use and how they work and all that.
Trust is really a two-way street.
Yeah.
Here. So it's like if you don't trust the employee, then why should you expect the employee to trust you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Leah
I
Stiegler,
like
this
that.
has been such a pleasure. I could go on all day. I mean, there's just so much to talk about. I'd love to have you back on the show and we can talk about some of these other things in the future.
Yeah,
So
for
thank you for
sure.
coming today. We sure appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for having me and absolutely would love to come back. So thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information at salesfuel.com.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.